Throughout history, freethinkers have outraged the religious with their wacky ideas about the virtues of free speech, reason, and of course, eating babies. Now, God is dying, and it's time to dispose of his remains. From the pits of hell, Satan sends two puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment with Ali Rizvi and Armin Navabi.
Welcome to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi, and with me is Armin Navabi. Armin, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, and I know that there's a lot to get into today because this is a topic where, we have an hour. We really have to cover a lot of stuff, and especially this is going to be a learning experience for me too, because even though I know about the situation, I think, Armin, you will be like the main source of this. So I'm really curious to see what's going on. We're talking about Iran again today. Iran had the election last Friday. Election, quote unquote, election, right? A lot of people rightly think.
You know what's up.
Yep, a lot of people do rightly believe that it was a faux election. The hardliner Ebrahim Raisi, who was really the only real choice, has quote unquote won the recent quote unquote election in Iran. Turnout was at a record low, like the lowest turnout in history for Iran, because there was no real choice that was existing on the ballot. Raisi is an extremely conservative man. He is under U.S. sanctions. He has been linked to mass executions of political prisoners since he was in his 20s. He's just considered a monster by most civilized people. So we're going to talk today about what this means, how this election, why it was engineered the way it was, which it was, and what this ultimately means for the future of Iran, its people, and also its regional allies and its enemies. Okay, and how this affects also, I think, that I'm actually really interested in how it affects like the whole Israel-US balance as well and the Iran nuclear deal. So yeah, let's get into it. So tell us about this election. Why was it engineered the way it was, and who is this guy, Raisi?
All right. So just to be clear, Iranian elections were always engineered. This was just more of a mask-off, transparent version of more transparently done so than earlier, and more no risk-taking anymore, not letting any opposition. And a lot of people think that was also by design. I mean, this whole election goes into the 43-year-long definition, like trying to come up with the process of coming up with a definition of what it even means to be an Islamic Republic, right? This was the struggle between being a republic and being an Islamic country existed from day one. And it continues, and people still can't figure out what an Islamic Republic means, especially in Iran. We could see, like, from day one, Khomeini, which is the founder of the Islamic Republic, we have audio, like, this is not made up stuff, this is not a conspiracy, this is like, we have audio recording of this. Khomeini mentioned that the people who even fight for a republic are traitors. They're the enemies of Iran, of his revolution. Well, not Iran, his revolution, right? Because he said, like, he would say that we didn't give martyrs for a democracy. We didn't give martyrs for a republic. He always said that we gave blood for Islam. We don't want Democrats. We want Muslims, real Muslims, to lead this country, right? So the whole idea of this country even being an Islamic Republic was against the wishes of its founders to begin with. And when we grew up in Iran, we didn't know that the first few years of the Islamic Republic of Iran, there was, like, it wasn't unanimously the mullahs deciding what this country is going to be run like. There was a major struggle at the beginning between different groups, which was mainly between the Islamists and the communists, right? And so early on when the revolution happened in Iran, most people who eventually supported Khomeini didn't really understand what this Islamic part of this revolution really means. They thought like Islamic means like they're fighting against a dictator monarch who is not giving people freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And what you're doing is like Islam is like a tool that is being used to bring justice and peace. Islam, religion, good. These are mullahs, are arbiters of morality and goodness and whatever. But what they were fighting for was for freedom, like the whole Islamic part of it. Like they didn't really understand. Most people had not understood what Khomeini's ideology is, and he was very clever that when his revolution was becoming more popular, the things that he mentioned in his book Velayat al-Faqih, he wasn't really expressing that when his revolution was becoming successful. But when the revolution finally becomes successful, you had the elements of the communists and the Islamists fighting for power, and eventually the commies were eradicated, not just like ideologically, but physically, like they were executed. And it's very interesting because this new president was responsible for a lot of those executions, right? And what is like we're talking about the executions in 1988, and these are mostly people from the Tudeh party and the communists and people who are now associated, like, which eventually led to the evolution of the radical group, the MEK, which is like a merger between Islam and communism. It's weird, but we won't get into that. But I mean, these people were mostly civilians that were being executed without due process, without any, just because of their participation in political activity against the party that was the Islamic Republic. And this also broke apart a lot of the mullahs. Like, believe it or not, a lot of these mullahs are not that bloodthirsty as much as Khomeini was. Like, there was a lot of people were like, "What are we doing? This is worse than this level of executions are worse than what the Shah was doing. Like, not even close to what the Shah was doing before the revolution, right?" And we have recordings of the person who was supposed to become the supreme leader after Khomeini being completely shocked by what the Khomeini was doing at that time. And he was addressing the people who were responsible for these executions, which was Raisi, which was one of them. The group of people who were responsible for this execution by the order of Khomeini, by the way, Ali, this is very interesting, without Khamenei even knowing at that time, right? So he was completely unaware of this going. But Montazeri, which was supposed to be the future supreme leader, he was telling this committee, which is, by the way, Ali, the committee of the people who were responsible for these executions are referred to as the Committee of Death, okay, or the Death Commission.
I love it. We need to have one of those.
Oh my, yeah, I actually don't joke about it. That's crazy. You know,
Okay.
like I don't know. Yeah. No, it's like this is okay, Ali. This what happened in 1988 is one of the most ignored mass executions of our lifetime, right? And a lot of people, a lot of human rights advocates think that now it's the time. Raisi, who was in that death committee, right, who was responsible for these executions, now that he's the president, now it's the time to bring that mass executions back into highlighted as much as possible. And I'm very happy that Amnesty International was on top of it, right? Because the news cycle shifts attention away from stuff like this really fast, right? So it was very important that there was some, like, we are activists, people, or like there are many other media, more a lot legitimate news outlets that are seen as like anti the Islamic Republic, like for BBC Persian or Iran International, some people see it as for them or against them, but people see them as with agenda, right? So it was important that some institution with some authority to have something ready to go while the media was paying attention to Iran election. So as soon as Raisi becomes the president, they could refer to that. And Amnesty International, love them or hate them, they were on top of it, and they came out with a report and they came out with a campaign to bring attention to Raisi's responsibility on the executions in 1988, right? And Ali, these executions are in the thousands. Okay, so the numbers are something between low numbers, according apparently to the regime itself, around 5,000, and according to human rights groups, 30,000. So there's something between, like, it's a very wide range.
So the regime itself said that, oh no, the numbers they're not that much. They're only 5,000. I mean, that was the regime.
Yeah, they accept at least 5,000.
So I can ask you a question?
Yeah.
So right now, recently we've had a lot of protests in Iran, right? So it was like 2018, 2019. Obviously, you had the 2009. That was also a disputed election. All of that. So they know there's a lot of domestic within Iran. There's a lot of opposition. There's a lot of political opposition to the regime, right? Like, especially to the hardliners. And I know some of that has become dampened. I guess people have become resigned to it. And I guess some of them are not as hopeful as they were before that they could actually get something done. So is that, were those the people that they executed before, right? The mass executions they did, were they similar? They were also like political dissidents?
Right.
Like the protesters that come out nowadays in Iran?
Those were a lot more those were a much bigger threat to the regime, to the Islamic Republic at that time than the protesters are today. Okay. That was like, but by the way, I forgot to finish my thought. I was saying that Montazeri, who was supposed to be the next supreme leader, this is what I was trying to get at. We have audio recording of him early on in the Islamic Republic's history, is early years. The audio recording of Montazeri is addressed to the Deaf Commission, saying that this is what you guys are doing right now. This is what Islamic Republic is going to be known for. You guys have blood on your hand, and we will go down in history as criminals, right? And this was the reason why Khomeini put Montazeri away as the next supreme leader. Like, he was after him standing up to Khomeini for these executions, he was put on house arrest until he died, right? But Raisi, he is like a very loyal dog to Khomeini before and now to Khamenei, right? And I think, like, the fact that he's so loyal, the fact that he's shown to just follow everything Khamenei wants is the reason why he's the pick for presidency, right? Right now, the hardliners, so this is what Khamenei had came out and said, is that we are now taking the second step of the revolution. So the Islamic Revolution that happened in 1979, that was the revolution itself that removed the monarchs. That was supposed to be the first step. What he's referring to that is happening is the second step. And a lot of people's interpretation of what the second step means is basically removing all sorts of dissent, basically making everybody in everything in the government, all, like, with the judiciary, the government, the executive branch, the parliament, the IRGC, and the Shura Nigahban, which is the Guardian Council, all of them completely in line, same ideology, everybody on the same side, no dissent, and everybody, most importantly than all of them, loyal to the supreme leader. So the thing is that a lot of people think, like, this move right now isn't something new. Now because look at what's happening right now. The presidency is under hardliners. The judicial system is going to be under hardliners, which it is right now. But the Khamenei is going to pick the second, another one is going to remain. The parliament is under hardliners. The IRGC is under everything is under the hardliners, and people think, like, okay, so this was the move, but this was always the plan since the amendment to the Constitution early on. When when people think, like, the name referred to the guardianship of the jurists in the Constitution, is not actually the guardianship of the jurists. They went back in and amended it, and they called it the absolute guardianship of the jurists, right? Because early on, Khomeini was mentioning, like, yes, we have a republic and people vote and blah, 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 blah. But Khomeini made it very clear early on, if the entire country says votes for something, and one person says no, then my word goes, right? So when you have the absolute part, like absolute part of the guardianship of the jurist, that means that the vote of the people is irrelevant, okay? This is just a game that we're playing because we have the republic part of the Islamic Republic. But at the end of the day, every law that is passed by the parliament, if the supreme leader doesn't like that, it will go away, right? Anyone that can become a candidate, if the supreme leader doesn't want him to become a candidate, that person doesn't have to be a candidate. Every person that becomes a candidate and gets approved and then runs and wins the election, if the supreme leader decides, like, you know what, yes, we approved you, but I don't like you anymore, then you go. This is not a democracy. But here's the thing: people think like this election, it means that it is now not a democracy. But the thing is that it was never a democracy. One thing that a lot of people are not familiar with is, like, even during Ahmadinejad, which was supposed to be a hardliner, completely in line with Khamenei before, like, Rouhani came to power, which is supposed to be a reformer, right? But Ahmadinejad, here's an example for people to understand that this is not something new, like, oh my God, this is all made up, this is all engineered, now everything is under the control of Khamenei. But think about it. Think about how it was before. Ahmadinejad didn't like his intelligence minister, like, kind of like, the CIA branch of his government, right? Go. You want to say something?
No. Keep going. I have to check on something. I heard something.
Okay. All right, let me put you down then. So this is important. He's going to miss this, guys. This is the most important part, okay? Ahmadinejad decided to put away his foreign minister, tell him to leave, because not his foreign minister, his intelligence minister, right? So basically, the CIA kind of branch of his government, right? And he asked him to leave because I'm not going to go into the detail why he didn't like him. But Khamenei told him, no, like, this is a minister I want for you, right? So what a lot of people don't understand is that one of the authorities, according to their own constitution of Iran, one of the things that the president can do is pick his ministers, right? But at least half of the ministers of the president, the supreme leader comes and directly picks for the president himself. So against their own constitution. And when Ahmadinejad, and this is years ago before Raisi, didn't like one of his ministers and wanted to dismiss him and pick someone else, so the supreme leader was like, no, you're going to keep this guy, right? And it's the details behind what was the issue is so amazing, okay? It actually gets into magic and curses and all that, but I won't get into that. But Ahmadinejad at that time, and again, remember, this is supposed to be a hardliner, and Khamenei hardliner, Ahmadinejad hardliner, and now there's a conflict. He said, you know what? I'm going to go home. I'm not kidding. Like, he went and he sat home and didn't leave his home for, I think, 11 days, right? He was like, I'm not going to play games. Like, I'm not going to participate in this government because you're not going to let me pick my own minister, right? So he was like, and Khamenei was mentioned to him, right? It was told to him that if you're not going to play ball, you're going to stop being the president. So that's how the game is played, right? So another example is when Khatami was in power, he came into power for reform, tried to be like, oh, I'm going to do reform and stuff. Him and the parliament, which at that time was the reformists, were passing two laws that were supposed to be expanding the powers of the presidency and also bring more, give more free speech to the media, right? So there were two laws that we were supposed to introduce, and the parliament voted, and they were like, yes, these are the two laws that is supposed to be the reforms that the people want. And the presidency was for it, which at that time was the reformers. The parliament was for it, which was the reformist parliament at that time. Now it's a hardliner parliament. And Khamenei was like, I see you have two laws there. It would be that are supposed to reform the country. It would be ashamed if I disagreed with them. Oh wait, I do disagree with them. No. And Khatami himself took them back, right? So this is all okay. So a lot of people. So was always a show. Okay, this whole election process, it doesn't really matter. People are like, oh my God, with the nuclear deal, now things are going to change because instead of a reformist, we're dealing with a hardliner. No, you're not dealing with the president, right? People are like, oh, the United States had a chance to deal with the reformist government, and now they lost the chance, and now they have to with the hardliner. They missed their opportunity on somebody that was eager to do negotiations with them. You were never dealing with the president. You were always dealing with the supreme leader. Nothing is changing. So again, here's a theory. I'm not completely for this theory, but some people also say that the presidents are shifted between hardliner and reformists based on the attitude that Khamenei based on the faith that Khamenei wants to show to the West at the time. Like, it's not because oh, now you have a reformist president. So you have Ahmadinejad, which is going to be the backup. And now that when Khamenei was like, okay, the pressure on Iran is getting too much, he just allows Rouhani to come to power to have a softer side. But again, at the end of the day, it's not that Rouhani or Ahmadinejad or Raisi you're dealing with. You're always just dealing with the supreme leader. Not even right now, the Vienna talks, everybody understands this, that the people they're talking to, they're supposed to be representative of Rouhani, but they're not. They know that they have to go home to Tehran and get permissions from Khamenei before they could approve anything. Like, the presidency has, even just yesterday, Rouhani came out like, Ali, I don't know if it's just everything, all the things that we were saying in the past few years is now transparently in the open, because these were things that we were saying people, but now they are saying it openly. They say, with the Zarif audio leaks that came out, and Rouhani is now saying here's what Rouhani said, guys. They're not hiding anything anymore. He said, we would have a deal by now if we had the permission. So Rouhani is not even mentioning Khamenei, but he's saying the deal between the nuclear deal between United States and Iran. He was like, because a lot of people think why is United States doesn't have a deal with Iran right now? Why they're not doing it? Why they're not doing it? Well, because Khamenei is asking for more things, right? It's not just the United States that people think you guys came out of the deal. You have to jump back into the deal. I'm dude, Khamenei is asking for sanctions that is not even relevant to the nuclear stuff, that was completely legal, which were about human rights, which is on his own office. Sanctions that had nothing to do with the nuclear deal. He wants those to be removed as well, and many other things. Sanctions on the IRGC, sanctions, So and they also want proof that they will never come back. These sanctions will never come back, because they know that if Biden removes the sanctions, it's not going to be as strong as anything that goes through Congress. And Iran's like, well, if you put it back, we need guarantee that you're never going to bring the sanctions back. And Biden can't do that without the Congress. Like, well, I can't do that. I'm not the fucking Congress, right? But the thing is that it's Khamenei that is asking for things, is not letting his team give away too much. And this is why Rouhani says, guys, don't blame us for not having a deal right now. If we had the permission, a deal would have been done a long time ago. So he, without mentioning Khamenei, is saying that this is Khamenei's fault that we don't have a deal. Go on, Eli. What are you going to say?
Well, I mean, I think you kind of answered it, but do they have any? So when they did the negotiations, right? When they're doing the negotiations with John Kerry and all that stuff, and then they had they do the negotiation part, and then they go and ask for permission, right? From Khamenei, do you approve of this thing? But the negotiation part is still done by these, the president, the foreign minister, and all these things like Zarif and all that.
They're
right?
just a messenger, though. They're nothing but the messenger. They're not actually doing the negotiation. Like, this is very interesting because guys, this is what we were guessing before, but now this is what they themselves are saying, because the audio leaks from Zarif was like saying, when I was talking, for example, to the Russians, like, because, by the way, a lot of people feel when we talk about the nuclear deal, people always think it's Iran and the United States. They don't realize that there's a whole bunch of other countries involved, right? Like, Russia is very much an active player in this. But like the Russian, like Zarif mentioned, like when the Russians were there and when he was telling them we can do this, the Russians themselves told us like, well, you don't know that you can do this. Shouldn't you be talking to shouldn't like they're like, hey, don't promise us something that you can't deliver. Maybe you want to call somebody before you make such a promise, right?
Yeah, but
like if the Russians completely understood that Zarif has no power, like he has to check with Khamenei's office before he could even offer anything. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so this Biden thing, it seems like there are some differences here. There's some similarities. Obviously, he's part of the Obama administration, so there's that good commonality. But also, I mean, Biden doesn't seem like he's going to be sort of appeasing Israel as much as Trump did, for instance. The one thing. The other thing is he seems like he wants to have more of a containment strategy towards Iran. It's like, you got to deal with them. That regime is not going to change. It's never going to be perfect. It is going to be what it is. So he has to take on an approach of pragmatism, right? When he's dealing with Iran. What are Khamenei's playing cards? Why is Khamenei saying, okay, this is what we want, and really, really extending like all of the demands? Like, what are his playing cards, and why does he think, does Biden have any interest in doing this where he's vulnerable, where he has to
well, they think that Biden has promised that they're going to come back to the deal. That's the promise he made to the American people, right? He said, like, we're going to go back to the deal, right? So they think like, okay, well, then we have you, but given that you had made that promise, then we have you by the balls, right? Because we're going to say that if you want the deal back, we don't want you to just remove the sanctions that has to do with the nuclear deal. We want you to remove all the sanctions, every single one of them, even the ones that has to do with the missiles, with our intervention around outside of your own borders, with the ones that are about human rights. And the human rights one is also an issue for two reasons. One, because Biden has come out making human rights like a major part of his, platform, as like, we care about human rights, right? We're gonna do deals with, like, we're gonna put human rights front and center when it comes to us dealing with other countries, right? Yeah. So now, if you remove the sanctions that are about human rights, it's gonna be like, excuse me, Biden, like, what the hell is wrong? Like, so he's stuck in a place where this administration is like, oh, you told everybody that you're going to go back to the deal, so remove everything, or else we're not going to go back to the deal. But also now, if he removes it, we're like, hey, wait, what happened? You don't care about human rights? Yeah. And another thing that makes this whole process a lot more difficult is that Raisi is president, and he's bringing a lot more attention to Iran's to Islamic Republic's poor human rights record. And like, also now, if he talks to this president, people are like, hey, what happened, Biden? Like, what happened to caring about human rights? You're
negotiating with a mass killer.
You're negotiating with a mass killer. Exactly. So again, it's very difficult for Biden's administration. Also, another thing that makes this very difficult for Biden administration is that a lot of the things that Khamenei is demanding from Biden are things that Biden can't give, like, because he's not like. It's the things that Congress can give, right? Like, if it was only undoing what Trump did, Biden can do that, right? But that's not what they want. They want guarantees. They want to be something that is not just could be undone by the next president. And Biden is like, well, you're talking like, my hands are tied. I can't do this without Congress. And Congress, even the Democrats in Congress are like not eager to like, wait, why are we removing the sanctions that are about human rights? Like, they don't want that. So again, it seems like here's the thing: everybody's saying that these sanctions will be removed. Like, we just got reports that some sanctions from on the office of the supreme leader is being suggested to be that are going to be removed, right? So it seems like Biden is like, okay, here, can we give you some of this? But again, Khamenei had made it clear that we're not going to accept any deal unless all of them are removed. So I know that we have to move past this part, and so at some point the deal is going to go through. But I don't understand how, because both of them are not willing to pass each other's red lines. I know they're going to do it. I'm just so curious. Well, I mean, everybody is. I don't know actually, but everybody seems to suggest that at some point this deal is going to go through. I'm just waiting to see how are they going to, pass each, like, who's going to back down, and what is that going to look like? Because to me, it seems like it's impossible. But I know it's not impossible. But I'm so glad that I'm not in charge of making these negotiations, because it seems like very difficult right now. But I hate the fact that some people that don't know the details behind what's happening, that are just like, going after Biden, or like, why are you not going back to the deal? Why you should have gone to the deal, back to the deal day one? Maybe like look at what's happening. Like, a lot of the responsibility is on Khamenei for why the deals are not back as well. Like, you don't know what's happening, and you're just like blaming Biden for this. Like, So, anyways, I do want to go through the numbers. Do you want to bring up anything? Yeah, do you have any?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about one thing. Like, this is I know you're not I don't know. Like, we talked about this. I know you're not a huge fan of Thomas Friedman, but there's something that he wrote in the New York Times about this that caught my eye. So I wanted to ask you what you thought. So he said, we're talking about the lifting of the sanctions. So he wrote, quote, "The regime was quite happy to use resources it gained from America's lifting of sanctions in the 2015 deal, not just to build more roads and schools, but also to fund and arm pro-Iranian Arab Shiites so that they could dominate Arab Sunnis in Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen," right? The whole proxy war. "This ensured that all four remained weak or failed Arab states, unable to threaten Tehran or produce any true multi-sectarian democracy that would embarrass it." How real do you think that is? I mean, we know the whole sectarian thing is real. I mean, they've been using that funding, but have they been using the stuff that they say from the sanctions to actually get this and ensure that all of these states remain weak and they can't threaten them?
Well, I don't know if remain weak is the right way to phrase it. I would say them remaining influential and powerful. Like, I think the framing should be, their goal is for the Islamic Republic, and especially the IRGC, to remain influential and powerful over there. I don't think I think it's about they want there to be power in those countries. They just want it to be their power. You know what I mean? Like, they want Iraq to become like one of Iran's colonies, basically. Technically, that's like they built their empire building. They want Syria, Iraq, Yemen to become basically Iran's colonies in the region. So yeah, if you mean they want the people, a government independent from Tehran within these countries to be weak relative to Iran's influence in these countries. Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's what they want, of course. Of course, that's what, but we knew that already. And yeah, of course, that they're using a lot of money is being spent on, a lot of the money that is from sanctions relief are being spent on what Khomeini called exporting the revolution. Because again, this was never about Iran. This was about Islam, and when it was about Islam, velayat, not Islam actually, like Khomeini's vision of Islam, right? Like the velayat faqih version of Islam, and it was never about a movement that ends within Iran's borders, right?
Okay. Yeah. So, can I ask you one more question before you go to the numbers? And this is one thing that I think a lot of other people are wondering too. What does this do for Israel? I mean, if the U.S. is now going back and trying to make this deal, and if whatever shape it takes, now you have a new Israeli government that's coming in, right? Is this going to cause more of a rift between the U.S. and Israel? especially with Biden, now that it's Biden.
I mean, that could be an entire stream on its own. And when we mention Israel, we have to ask like who we're speaking in Israel, right?
We're talking about the new government that just came in.
Well, the new government needs a security threat to be able to signal to the voters that Netanyahu is not only Mr. Security, that they could be like, oh, we're going to be tough to threats as well, right? And honestly, like Hamas is not like a big enough threat to these people for anybody, so you need like the big baddie Iranian government for these people to be like, we're going to protect the Israeli citizens as well. Like, so for them, they do want it, they do need an opportunity to show like, oh, look, this person like is a radical, scary person, and this shows that Islamic Republic of Iran is getting more and more extremely hard, radical, and we're going to come out, and this is an opportunity for Bennett, which is the new prime minister, which is the leader of the far right-leaning party, more right than Likud itself, to come out and basically, go like, yeah, we're strong as well. Don't worry, like we got you. We're gonna like send, because Netanyahu is always famous for giving speeches that makes Israel look tough and strong, and we're gonna be like aggressive against our enemies. So I think it gives them that opportunity to do that. So that's yeah. But overall, here's the thing. Overall, it's not going to change much because the IRGC is what, and its proxies is what Israel has to deal with. Okay, and they don't wait. The IRGC doesn't deal with the presidency, and they don't even wait for the presidency. They think like as the audio leaks from Zarif, which was the foreign minister of the president Rouhani's office, he admitted that we hear what the IRGC is doing from the Americans. Like we know what the IRGC is doing after the Americans know what they're doing. Okay, so the idea of like the security issue for Israel being more, it's just a show. They when it comes to anything outside of Iran's borders, the IRGC never waits for the office of the presidency. It has zero influence on them. Okay, it has zero influence on what they do and what the decisions that they make. Okay, so that's what I think, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's do the numbers.
Susanna is like, IRGC saying foreign minister who? Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So I have these numbers prepared because a lot of the things that I was curious about, I couldn't find, like, and people were reporting it, so I had to crunch the numbers myself. So these numbers are the numbers that you could find anywhere yourself.
You're gonna have to explain it.
Right, yeah. So there are certain numbers. Yeah, there are certain numbers that is reported everywhere, but then I had to calculate my own numbers, and I will try to explain what's happening. Okay, so this is a column that is the numbers for the 2021 election where Raisi won. So the turnout rate, here's the problem. This is the number that everybody's reporting. The turnout rate of 48.8%, right? This is not the correct turnout rate. What happened is we had a record. So actually, I have to give you some context first, okay? So before the elections, there was a giant push, giant campaign, the most amount of unity against the anti-regime people that we have seen for the past 43 years, okay? Because for the past 43 years, the anti-regime people were divided, right? You had the communists, you have the pro-monarchs, you have the secular Democrats, you had so many different groups that Mashrutaha, I don't know how you translate that, but there's so many different groups, and they didn't see eye to eye on anything. In fact, they hated each other. And now it seemed like for the first time they got together and they were like, let's get united. Okay. I want to mention the MEKs as well, but the MEKs still, after all this unity, they were like, okay, no, we're gonna everybody, all the opposition is gonna get united, and people are like, what about the MEK? Like, no, we're still gonna leave out the MEK even now. So not the MEK. Other than the MEK, all the opposition was united, and they came out with a campaign called Rai Birai, which basically translates to no to voting. Okay, so. This, like, people say that these the voting process is a joke. Anybody who participates in elections is legitimizing this government. Okay, especially because Javad Zarif, which is the foreign minister of the Rouhani administration, goes around internationally, and every time somebody bring up the fact that a lot of Iranians are upset with the Iran's government, and they don't see this government representing them, and the human rights issues and the political prisoners and stuff, what Javad Zarif would throw around was like, but we have more than 70% participation rate in our elections, right? How could it be that it's impossible for Iranians to be upset with this government? Like, of course, the Iranians want this government, choose this government, say yes to this government because of our people. Look, we have higher than 70%. Like, look at, America, all these Western European countries, they brag about being democratic countries, but none of them has as high participation rates in elections as we do. And they say, like, and Zarif said, we are nothing without our people. If these turnout rates were low, it would embarrass us because we have no legitimacy without the people who participate in our elections, right? So he would throw it out in every reporter that brought this up. He would throw it in their face. And even Khamenei came out and said that a low participation rate would destroy Iran's the Islamic Republic's legitimacy around the world. And he even said that it's pathetic that some countries have around 40% participation rate. How embarrassing for those countries that have around 40% participation rate, right? So people got the memo. People are like, okay, so that's what voting means. Voting means that we are, because some people say, like, even in the 2017 election, some people say don't vote. Voting is legitimizing this government. But the people were divided. Some people are like, no, when we're voting, we're not legitimizing this government. We're waiting for reformers because they might bring change. That doesn't mean we agree with this government or anything like that. But it's better to vote and get something better rather than get nothing at all. But now people, after 8 years of Rouhani and seeing nothing improving and human rights even going down worse and economy not improving and all that, people are like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to send a message. We're going to join this campaign of not voting because we want a referendum. You don't give us a referendum, so we will turn the elections into a referendum. We're going to vote by not voting. We're going to make ourselves heard by not participating in this election, right? So what happened is that this election, and especially after all the candidates that were supposed to be, the candidates who were removed by the Guardian Council, anybody that could have competed with Raisi was removed. People, like, nobody anticipated after that. Nobody anticipated anyone winning other than Raisi, right? So what people were waiting for after that was not to see who's going to win, because people were like, obviously Raisi is going to win. You removed anyone else that had a chance, right? The number that people were waiting for was the turnout rate, right? And here's a mistake that the anti-regime people made. They came out and said, oh, it's going to be only maximum 20%. It's going to be under 28, between 18 and 22%. There's not going to be any higher. I'm like, oh my God, why are you guys doing this? I was saying, like, guys, just say under 50% is going to be amazing. We want under 50%. But these idiots went around and were like, it's going to be 20% and 20%. Like, stop. Because if you say 20%, if it ends up being like 30% or 40% or 50%, it's going to look like they won. Right?
Expectations, I know.
Yeah, don't set up the 20% expectation. People are like, no, Armin, you don't understand. It's going to be 20. Like, I've talked to anybody, and no one's going to vote. Nobody. I talked to my auntie and this person and that person, and no one's going to vote. It's going to be 20%, right? I was like, guys, just say under 50% and call it a win. So here's the thing. It ended up being 48.8%, which is the lowest turnout ever. However, I have an adjusted number here for you, okay? Because what was interesting is, look at this, Ali. From among the people who voted, 12% of them, or 13% of them, if you round it, was void votes. And this was the highlight of this elections, okay? Because for many years, people understood that a lot of the people who vote don't want to vote, but they need the stamp. So when you're born in Iran, you get this notebook, which is supposed to be an ID notebook. You have an ID card, but you also have an ID notebook. I don't know how to translate that. It's called a Shanasname, but it has, I have mine. I could show it to you. It has like a page on it where you get stamps every time you vote. And you need those stamps, especially if you want to get a government job, or if, like, I don't know, like there could be consequences if you don't have that stamp. Okay, right? So the understanding was that there are so many people who vote not because they want to vote, but because they need that stamp. Okay, so you can see in 2017.
That's why Iran has such high turnout numbers even before. I mean, like 73, 72%, like in the past.
Right. So the argument is that in Iran voting is not mandatory, right? But also the understanding is that there could be consequences for you not having that stamp. So just that by itself makes a lot of people want to go and collect that stamp, right? But the interesting thing is that, like in 2013 elections and anything before it, the void votes were very, very low. Okay, in 2017 they became a lot higher which was around 3%. That was already very high, and that was the first ever like major push that we saw for people saying don't vote, it legitimizes the regime. You could see that from 2013 to 2017 it actually picked up. That means that there were people who went there, stood in line, got to the voting booth, but they just didn't write anyone's name, or a lot of them actually wrote joke names or celebrity names, American celebrities, like, you know, Obama. Some people say they voted for Obama or stuff like that, right? But they're like, you know, if you're in, especially if you're in the military, or if you have a government job, any other government job, you want to get that stamp, or there could be consequences and stuff. But this election, you could see that when there was a giant push for people not voting, even from the people who wanted to collect that stamp, a lot of them, like basically 13% of the people, they didn't write anyone's name, and that's why the void votes in this election was the second runner-up, right? So the first candidate, the highest number of votes, Raisi got that 62% votes, and the second one was not any of the candidates. The second high runner-up after the candidate who won was void, and the third one was not even a reformer. The third one was another hardliner, and the fourth one was a reformer. So hardliner, number one, hardliner, number two, void votes, number three, again another hardliner, number four, a reformer. But go on, Ali.
So what you have here, so I'm just reading the column for people who are hearing the audio. So under 2021, you have turnout, then you have hardliner and reformer. So you've divided that. And then under that, you've got void, Ebrahim Raisi, and other votes. Right.
So for hardliner, I added up the votes for Raisi and Rezai because they're both hardliner, right?
But underneath that, Rezai is under other votes, right?
No. Rezai is like there was one other candidate which was not a reformist or reformer or hardliner. It was just like you just got around 3%. So that's important. I just put that there just to make sure that my test gets up to 100% to make sure my numbers are correct.
Okay.
So that's why I put that.
So,
but yeah.
Yeah. So that's how. So what you're saying is that the second runner-up was the void vote. So just for people who are listening to this, 2009, 2013, the void votes are pretty much negligible. And then 2017, they're 2.9%, so almost 3%, which was pretty much unheard of. That's considered a very high number of people who are going there to vote so they can get their stamp, but they just write in the name of, I don't know, Steven Seagal or, some other celebrity, whatever. So that's what they do. And that number, 3%, which was pretty high in 2017, 4 years later, now in 2021, is 12.87%. So 13% of people about voted. Yes. Basically, they went to the polls and they voted for no one. So what you're doing is when you want to adjust the turnout, you are adjusting the void numbers.
Mm-hmm. No. So the turnout, therefore, is the 48% minus the. So first, I have to adjust the void number because this 12%. This 13% is 13% of the people who voted, right?
Right.
So I want to adjust the number to get the percentage of the total of the number of people who can vote, right? So the population of Iran is 85 million, right? 60 million is the voting of the population of the people who are voting age and they can vote, right?
Right.
So among the 60 million, right, only 48% of them voted. So this is 48% or 49% of the 60 million, not 48% of the 85 million, but only of the people who could vote, right? So that means that if 12% of the population voted, 13% of the population voted void, you have to adjust what's the percentage of the entire of all the people who could vote. Then you have to multiply the 48% times the 12%. So that means the void vote of out of the everybody who could vote, it would be 6%, right? So 6% of the people who could vote voted void, right? And so to get the actual turnout rate, I will have to make 48% minus this 6% over here, right? So I shouldn't be minus the 12% because this is the 12% out of the people who could vote. This 48% is out of all the people. Sorry, this 48% is out of all the people who could vote, right? So I have to minus the 6% because this 6% is also out of all the people who could vote, right? This 12% is only out of the people who voted, not out of the people who could vote. Yeah. So it has to be 42. So it has the number that you need to get the actual turnout. So basically, let me simplify this. To get the actual turnout rate, you have to remove the people who went there but didn't technically vote. Like they put in their ballot, but they didn't put anyone's names. You can't. I don't think you can count those as turnout because they technically didn't vote, right? So if you want to get the actual turnout rate, all the people who didn't vote for anybody should be removed from the turnout rate. So the actual turnout rate is 42%, right? And this is very important because the 48% number, everybody is rounding it up to 50%, right? But the 42%, people will be rounding it down to 40%. So the narrative is going from saying half of the population voted to 40%. I mean, the 40% is a lot more, would like delegitimize. That was the number that Khamenei gave himself as pathetic, as a number that would completely delegitimize the government. And that's what happened. So I don't know. The regime is going around and saying 50% of the people voted, and everyone else is also saying that 50% voted. But the actual number is 40% of the people voted. This is the number that people should be reporting right now, but it's too late because everybody's just running with the 50%. Right?
Yeah, I mean, so, I don't think anybody's gonna think of it in this kind of detail that you did here. So yeah, this is really interesting. So that's so basically so there was an actual movement of people saying that go out and don't vote.
It was the biggest campaign, the biggest like the opposition against the regime has always been the greatest weakness that everybody makes fun of them for is their disunity, right? A common joke is that every time you guys make a new group against the regime, it's just like three of you, right? Three of you are making a new party, and then within 1 week, one of you descends from the party and like becomes like a new branch of this party that you just created. Like the internal fighting, the Islamic Republic of Iran has nothing to fear because you guys keep fighting. The opposition keeps fighting among itself. There's nothing that even in your meetings, you can't even agree on what to order, where to go eat, like let alone agreeing on how to dismantle this regime, right? So that was the ongoing joke about the opposition. So this was like, wow, they actually managed to get together and put all their political differences, like, capitalist, communist, I don't know, monarchist, secular Democrat. You managed to actually put that all aside and unite over this campaign, which was the not voting campaign, right? So it was, like, you guys are actually capable of getting something done, right? So that was a very new and unique thing, right? Mm-hmm. So with this,
yeah, Armin, what happens now? So in 2009, you had the whole Green Revolution thing that happened. I mean, you had Mousavi, who was the reformer candidate, and he didn't win the election, and then the protesters came out and they thought it was rigged in favor of Ahmadinejad, who got reelected. All of that. And then you've had subsequent protests after it. This result is even more egregious, right? So now you've got the IRGC consolidating power. You've got Khamenei basically consolidating power pretty much everywhere. There's no separation now between the political affairs and the whole spiritual affairs of Vilayat Faqih and everything. So what are you hearing from activists and protesters? Are they going to do the kind of thing that they did in the past, or have they just given up?
Well, as you speak, we're having the greatest strikes, united strikes in Iran right now in the oil industry, right? As we speak right now, this is ongoing, right? So this is like something I want to work with the Iranian communists with, because they're very experienced when it comes to strikes and all. And this is like this government's Achilles heels, because a lot of people underestimate in the 1979 revolution. Like a lot of people think like look at the protests of the people that came to the street and managed to make that revolution happen in 1979 and brought that the Pahlavi dynasty. But one thing that is not highlighted often enough was the initial push that actually was very devastating to the Pahlavi dynasty, was that strikes by the people who were working in the oil industry, right? That was like, when it comes to hitting them where it hurts, that was extremely significant, right? So it's one, like we saw, this is something that I thought like would be, I'm now looking at, because this could actually hurt more than other protests in the streets, right? So and again, Ali, it's really good that you asked this, because this is not getting enough attention, right? Because when people come into the streets and they don't have any guns and they don't have any power, and you see that the government shuts down the internet and then shoots a whole bunch of people, and it doesn't get enough international attention because the internet is out and the videos are not getting out fast enough. Once the internet is back off, the news cycle has already moved on to something else. They did that last time and it was very effective. But the government has shown that whenever it feels enough threat, it doesn't mind completely ignoring human rights and just aiming for the head when they come to the streets, right? And shooting people, right? So they do not shy away from like completely taking it up to the extreme when it comes to making sure people stay back, right? However, these new strikes that are becoming, it's different from when people come into the streets and protest against the government. This is more subtle, because it's not like they are coming out and raising havoc, and it's really hard to shoot these people because they're not doing anything other than not working, right? But also it could hurt a lot. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm very interested to see in this type of activism right now is getting a lot more popular, and it's unfortunate that it's not getting more attention, because it's not as sexy as when people come out and say like, screw this government and we hate you, and like
the rally type of activism.
The rally type, so like, yeah, it's not as sexy and it doesn't get as much attention internationally, but it could be devastating, right? These type of strikes, and
it's like having domestic sanctions from within.
Yes, exactly. Yes, this is the Iranian people telling the government, like, you think United States removing sanctions is going to save you? What about our sanctions?
Yeah.
What if we put sanctions on you, right? So this is perfectly said, Ali. That was beautiful. Perfectly said. Thank you. That was good. That's good. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that from you. Do you want to highlight some comments before we?
Yeah, let's do that.
One thing, before we highlight, just one last thing. This was, by everybody accepts that this was a humiliating defeat for the reformist movement, right? The reformist movement in Iran is the most hated movement right now by all sides,
including
from the hardliners,
including the pro-reform people.
Well, there is no pro-reform people. People there's 4%, right? No, like people like there are people are either mostly okay. Let's not generalize, right? Mostly are just like pro hardliners or pro or anti-regime. Okay, I don't want to say pro-toppling the regime, because even the anti-regime people, some of them are pro-toppling the regime, some of them hate this regime, but they're like unsure what's going to happen if this regime gets toppled, so they're not like, yeah, I hate this regime, but I don't know if I'm for toppling it, right? So I'm just going to go with a more general term of instead of saying pro-toppling, I would say anti-regime, right? So the two main groups are hardliners, right, which based on my calculations, which I won't get into, is 35% of the country, okay? And anti-regime people, which is 42% of the country. And reformers are at 4%. The reformers are hated by both by the anti-regime people and by the hardliners. It's very, very popular right now in Iran to be anti the reformers, right? Like if it's basically political suicide from all sides to be for the reformers, right? So the idea of Khatami, Rouhani, those camp right now, they seem like, they don't seem like they have a future, right? When it comes to Iran's politics, it's just the hardliners versus the anti-regime people.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so let's take a couple of comments, and we're already at an hour, so let's do another few minutes so we can just take in some of the comments. There's a question from Susanna, right?
What time?
Well, I mean, I guess it was 11:52. So we've already covered this. So Music Guy has been asking some questions, but we already covered that, the protesting during the whole election. So we just covered that right now.
Okay, Music Guy, we answered you.
Yeah. Do you think that there will be momentum in continuing the boycott, or have people been discouraged? Well, yeah. So this is, I guess, the boycott with the oil industry.
Well, it's like this is just picking up right now as we speak. So I don't know. It's too soon to speak. What I can tell you is that in response to some of these strikes, a lot of these oil companies have came out and have then have laid them off. A lot of these people, as soon as they started striking, instead of giving them to demands, they just officially hand out their, papers that you're laid off. And a lot of these people who were on strike were showing to the cameras, like they all picked up the papers to show to the cameras, like, look, this is where the response. They just laid us off. And here's something, Ali. This is how this strike could be the way this strike could not work. Like one way that some people are suggesting, I don't know. Okay. This something I'm worried about is it's a lot of anti-Chinese racism that might start growing in Iran, because the Islamic Republic is getting closer to China and filling a lot of jobs with Chinese money and all of that. And some of these strikes might not work because some people are saying that, they're going to just fill them up with Chinese workers and stuff like that. And unfortunately, one thing I'm seeing again becoming more popular among anti-regime people is some anti-Chinese racism. Like I'm trying to in my Persian show, I'm trying to I'm gonna continue to try to direct this at CCP and like fight against anti-Chinese kind of narratives. So we'll see if that works. But I'm seeing like there's a lot of hatred towards that is picking up. So we'll see what happens.
All right, so 11:56, Susanna saying, please talk about the U.S. reaction to Raisi's presidency. You think you could do that quickly?
Well, I could I'm just going to quickly mention that they didn't congratulate them, and they mentioned that it's a concern, Raisi's human rights and stuff. So they brought attention to that. The people who did one thing I could tell you that it was Russia's Putin, like just. Was the first country to contact the Islamic Republic and congratulate Raisi. Like it was so fast that people were actually amazed about how little time it took Putin to contact Iran and congratulate them. But no, U.S. was like raised concerns so far about the human rights record and stuff like. And also they also mentioned the fact that this was not the Iranians' people's choice, and this election was engineered. And Rouhani's office spokesperson came out and responded to the United States and responded to Antony Blinken and said that United States, this is against international laws because United States has no right saying something, meddling in our politics, and they have no right saying this, which is weird because I don't think there's any laws that prevents commenting on Iran's politics. So yeah, just a standard Iranian Iranian government response, which is like just crying about intervention, even though it was just a comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any info on D. Boudreau is asking any info on reaction at Tehrangelis. So the Tehrangelis, people don't know, there's a big Iranian population in Los Angeles. A lot of the people, they tend to be very, very anti-regime. So and Music Guy wants to move there. Of course we do. And Susanna said there were a bunch of protests, really intense protests and confrontations at the Iranian embassy where she is.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, good.
Anyway, listen, this is super. Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, I was just saying this was super, super informative. I mean, there's a lot of things that I learned. There's numbers. That number chart is like fascinating because I had never thought of adjusting. I didn't know about this void thing. I always used to wonder. I remember in HuffPost, I wrote this article in 2009 about what the thing that 70 million Iranians really voted for. I was like, these people really want to come out and vote. I didn't know that they actually get stamps in a book for that, which is
I should have I have my Shanasnama somewhere. I should one day bring it up because I voted for Khatami many years ago when I was like a teenager, and I collected that stamp. So maybe one day I will bring it up and show it to people.
The stamp that would be kind of cool. I think we're going to be revisiting this quite a bit anyway. So hey everyone, thank you for listening. I hope this was as educational for you, what Armin said, as it was for me. We'll see what happens from here onwards. There's still a lot to talk about, right? I mean, I don't think an hour is enough to cover it. But if you like what you hear here, please consider going to patreon.com/SJME and becoming a patron. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month, and you will get 5 to 6 episodes a month that you can tune into, watch live. If you want to ask your questions ahead of time, you can go to the Patreon page. You can put in your questions. Your questions will be the ones that are addressed first, and you can also engage in the stream and ask your questions.
Actually, let me explain that better because a lot of people can't be live here with us. So again, we're making it possible for our patrons. If you're a patron, when we post the upcoming stream on Patreon, and you don't know if you could be here to ask your question, you could just post your comment under the Patreon post. You could post your question as a comment under there, and we'll make sure to ask your questions so that if you can't join us live, at least we make sure that your question is answered, and then when you watch it later, you know that your question is being addressed there. So yeah, there's that. Okay, cool. All right.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming and listening to us. And we have our end of month Q&A happening on June 30th. So be sure you join in and then come here. That's a public episode. You can bring all your friends and stuff and ask us about whatever you want. Yes. So that's going to be on June 30th.
Okay.
And until then, be best. Thank you.
Be best, everyone. Bye.
The Secular Jihadists have been made possible thanks to the Illuminati and the covert support of Israel and the CIA. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. If you like what we do, please support us. Share the podcast with your friends. Write and tweet us with topic and guest suggestions. Or head over to secularjihadists.com and give $1 or more for exclusive access to live video. Have your questions read and answered on the air and more. Till next time, may the flying spaghetti monster be with you.